Let's begin here, because most people still confuse magnetism with beauty. They assume it fades with age, that it's tied to youth, or some passing trend. But the truth is quieter, deeper. A woman becomes irresistible, not by what she wears or how she looks, but by how fully she inhabits herself. She doesn't chase attention. She doesn't need to. Her presence has weight, not noise. Her energy doesn't ask, "Am I enough?" It answers, "I already am." And that is what draws people in the calm certainty of someone who no longer performs. It's not magic, and it's not luck. It's the result of inner work, the kind Jung called individuation. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Before I continue, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and if reflections like this resonate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's explore this together. Because many women have been taught to play roles. The good girl, the pretty one, the achiever, the caretaker. Each of these masks what Jung called the persona serves a purpose. It helps us move through the world. But when we live only through the mask, we begin to forget who we are underneath it. And slowly, without noticing, we trade our power for approval. You can spot this in the woman who's always adjusting herself in words, tone, posture, just to make others comfortable. In the one who fears taking up space. In the one who believes her worth depends on how others respond to her. But something changes quietly and often after pain when a woman begins to question this. When she no longer asks, "Do they like me?" and starts asking, "Do I feel like myself?" That question marks the beginning of real transformation. It's the first break in the old pattern. And from that point on, everything starts to shift. Jung believed that a woman becomes whole not by rejecting her masks, but by seeing them clearly, choosing when to wear them, and never confusing them for her soul. The soul does not beg. The soul does not cling. The soul, when unburdened, radiates. This is what makes a mature woman captivating. Not a perfect face, but a coherent presence. Not volume, but clarity. Not control, but inner gravity. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore 6 behaviors that reflect this inner alignment. 6 ways a woman can become magnetic by being more herself, not less. And it begins here, not with beauty, not with charm, but with self-possession. Because once a woman returns to herself, the world begins to turn toward her. We live in a world that teaches women to measure their worth in mirrors, to judge themselves by reflections often distorted, framed by youth trends and external approval. But something begins to break when a woman, perhaps not the youngest in the room, becomes the one everyone notices. Not for what she wears, not for what she says, but for something harder to name, something felt. She doesn't move urgently. She doesn't speak to fill silence. She simply exists in a way that commands attention without trying. And that is where the fracture begins, because it challenges the old belief, the belief that attraction is earned through perfection, that to be seen one must always be adjusting hair, voice, opinion, availability, that if a woman is not chosen quickly, she must work harder. But this belief, though deeply rooted, begins to unravel the moment a woman sees herself through a different lens. Not the one handed to her by society, but the one offered by her own inner gaze. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world. For women, this often means becoming who they think they need to be: agreeable, pleasing, compliant. It's a mask that smiles while shrinking, that blends in just to be accepted, that fears silence because silence might mean rejection. And for a time it works. She receives approval. She gets attention. But something essential is missing, something she can feel in her body, in her voice, in the way she carries herself. It is the absence of self-possession, the absence of truth. Because when you live only through the mask, the soul begins to starve. You say yes when you mean no. You chase when you should walk away. You confuse being desired with being valued. And slowly, this dissonance turns into fatigue, emotional exhaustion, a quiet grief. She may not speak of it aloud, but she knows it. She knows the loneliness of performing, the hollowness of approval that never satisfies. She knows the pain of being seen, yet never truly known. This is the fracture, the first real split between the outer performance and the inner truth. It often shows up as restlessness, a subtle resistance to being constantly available, a quiet hunger for space, silence, and authenticity. It shows up in the questions she begins to ask in private. Why do I always bend to make things easier for others? Why do I feel empty even when I'm admired? Why do I lose myself trying to be someone else's fantasy? These questions are not weaknesses. They are doorways. They are the first stirrings of the self, the deeper part of her that has waited patiently beneath the noise. This self cannot be decorated into existence. It must be heard, remembered, reawakened. And often, this awakening begins, in contrast, by watching another woman walk into the room with no effort to impress, and yet she shifts the entire atmosphere. She does not chase. She does not compete. She does not speak loudly or dress to provoke. Still, everyone notices her. Why? Because she is whole. Because she is not seeking, she is being. This contrast cuts through illusion. And for many women, it's the first painful realization that all the pleasing in the world will never feel like power. That all the effort to be perfect has led to exhaustion, not connection. And yet, this fracture is sacred because it creates space to question, to remember, to unlearn. Jung believed that before we can become whole, we must face the parts of ourselves we've abandoned in exchange for love. The parts we've silenced, the instincts we've buried, the standards we've lowered just to keep someone interested. And that confrontation is not gentle. It often comes after disappointment, after rejection, after being overlooked one too many times, even while doing everything right. But this moment, painful as it is, holds a quiet power because it marks the beginning of discernment. She no longer accepts attention as proof of value. She no longer chases affection that comes without effort. She begins to ask, not do they like me, but do I feel like myself around them? That is the first boundary. And it is internal. You can feel the shift in how she responds to messages, in how she moves through conversations, in how she begins to pause, not out of insecurity, but clarity. She stops explaining herself to people who don't listen. She stops decorating herself for people who cannot see. She stops shrinking. And in that stopping, she begins to return. Return to what is quiet. Return to what is real. Return to the body, to breathe, to presence. This return is not loud. It does not announce itself, but it is unmistakable. Others sense it, even if they can't name it. The woman who once bent herself in all directions now moves with an invisible edge. Not unkind, just unmoved by pretense. Not cold, just clear. Not detached, but deeply grounded. This is the fracture that changes everything. Not because she was broken, but because she saw the cracks in the performance. And instead of covering them, she listened. Because underneath every persona is a woman waiting to be whole, and her return to herself is not the end of love. It is the beginning of real connection. In the next part, we will explore the turning point when the old mask is no longer enough, and the woman begins to integrate what was lost. She steps into her presence fully, and the magnetism others feel. It is the echo of her soul finally unhidden. Something profound begins to stir when a woman recognizes the cracks in her performance. Not everyone sees them, but she does. At first, it feels like a quiet discomfort, a subtle weariness when trying to be enough. But beneath that fatigue lies something deeper, a tension between who she appears to be and who she truly is. Carl Jung called this the conflict between persona and shadow. The persona is the mask, the agreeable one, the accommodating one, the one who earns approval through control charm or quiet self-sacrifice. And the shadow. It holds everything. The persona denies the anger, the desire, the untamed voice that says, "I'm tired of pleasing everyone but myself." This is not rebellion, it is recognition. For many women, the persona was shaped early. Be kind, be polite, don't ask for too much, make others comfortable, smile when you're hurting. Over time, these expectations become identity, and eventually she forgets that the mask was something she put on, not something she is. But here's the cost. When the persona becomes a lifestyle, the shadow grows restless. Not because it is evil, but because it is honest. The shadow is not something to fear. It is the truth, buried under silence. It is the part of her that knows when she's being overlooked. The part that bristles when she is interrupted. The part that aches after pretending to enjoy conversations that drain her. And for years, that part was hidden even from herself. Because most women are not taught to express their shadow. They are taught to soften it, suppress it, or reframe it as guilt. But here's the deeper truth. Every time she bit her tongue when something felt wrong, every time she agreed to stay just to avoid conflict, every time she laughed off disrespect to keep the peace, the shadow remembered. It doesn't forget. And so the inner tension builds, not as loud rebellion, but as quiet withdrawal. She begins to pull back from spaces where she once overextended. She notices how often she overexplains, how rarely she says no without apology. And suddenly, the persona feels tight, like a dress that no longer fits. This is the moment she starts to feel like a stranger to herself. Not broken, just misaligned. She may still look the same to others. She may still be called easygoing, charming, nice. But inside, a question echoes louder than ever. Where did I go in all of this? This is the real fracture, the loss of intimacy with oneself. And Jung believed that healing doesn't begin by becoming someone new. It begins by reclaiming the parts of you that were left behind. It is the return of the voice you silenced to be liked, the return of the instinct you ignored to keep a relationship, the return of the self you postponed, hoping love would make it feel worth it. But that return cannot happen without a reckoning. And that reckoning is uncomfortable because the persona doesn't want to let go. It wants to stay needed. It whispers, if you stop being nice, they'll leave. If you set a boundary, you'll be alone. If you speak up, you'll ruin everything. And these whispers feel convincing because for a long time the persona worked. It got praise. It earned affection. It helped her survive. But she's not here to survive anymore. She's here to live, to be whole, to be seen. And so the shadow begins to rise, not as chaos, but as clarity. She notices the exhaustion of over-explaining. She sees the imbalance in relationships where she gives more than she receives. She feels the weight of pretending to be fine when she's quietly unraveling. And something inside her shifts. She no longer wants to be admired for how well she hides her needs. She wants to be loved where she tells the truth. But this shift is not immediate. There is a middle ground, a space where she can't go back to who she was, but isn't yet sure who she's becoming. And that liminal space is sacred, because that is where integration begins. Jung taught that the goal is not to destroy the persona or to unleash the shadow recklessly. The goal is to integrate them, to choose when to be soft and when to stand firm, to know how to give and how to protect what is sacred, to bring the truth of the shadow into conscious expression with dignity and self-respect. This is what magnetism truly looks like. Not perfection, but coherence. A woman who radiates strength and softness, mystery and clarity, kindness without self-erasure. And those around her feel it, even if they can't name it. They feel it in the way she speaks without rushing, in the way she listens without needing to prove anything, in the way she walks into a room without checking to see if she belongs there, because she no longer needs permission. She is not performing. She is being. And what makes her captivating is not the way she follows rules, but the way she rewrites them silently, steadily through her presence. This is where the shadow transforms. It becomes wisdom. It becomes standards. It becomes the invisible line between what she allows and what she walks away from. And that line, drawn without explanation, without threat, changes everything. Because the woman who once lived to be chosen has now chosen herself. In the next part, we'll explore what happens when this inner alignment begins to shape outer behavior, when confidence is no longer a pose, but a quiet current beneath everything she does. This is the turning point, the beginning of true embodiment, and the start of a magnetism that doesn't chase, doesn't convince. It simply draws others in, because it comes from a woman who has come home to herself. The turning point begins quietly. It is not an announcement nor a sudden performance. It is more like a light shifting inside, illuminating corners that had been left in shadow. A woman who once moved through the world trying to be pleasing begins to realize she no longer has to prove herself. She discovers that attraction, respect, and even love do not depend on perfection. They flow from presence. Presence is not something you purchase. It is not found in cosmetics or the latest trends. Presence is energy aligned with essence. It shows when a woman knows who she is and no longer hides from it. You can sense it before she speaks. It radiates in her posture, her calm voice, her steady gaze. Carl Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming whole, often begins in silence. Not the silence of withdrawal, but the silence of recognition. A woman notices she has carried a mask for too long. She sees the weight of all the times she tried to decorate herself into worth. And then she makes a subtle but powerful choice. She puts down the mask. At first, this feels strange. The old patterns call to her. The persona whispers that she should still smile when she feels uneasy, still rush to answer, still soften her opinions. Yet something stronger emerges. The shadow she once feared now feels like truth. It reminds her of the dignity she had denied herself, the boundaries she had postponed, the power she had overlooked. The awakening is not about becoming harder. It is about becoming whole. She learns that confidence is noticed before makeup. The way she carries her shoulders says more than any accessory. The tone of her voice communicates more than words. When she slows down, she becomes magnetic without effort. Her silence carries more weight than her explanations once did. This shift also reshapes how she connects with others. She realizes that when she does not cling, she holds the interaction. Desire grows in space, not in suffocation. Men feel drawn when they are not guaranteed. They lean in when she leans back into herself. Her detachment is not indifference. It is self-possession. It is the quiet recognition that her worth is not determined by constant reassurance. Style, too, transforms in this awakening. She no longer dresses to please a passing gaze. She dresses to amplify her essence. Colors and fabrics become extensions of her energy. A fragrance becomes her signature, not a disguise, but a reminder of her own presence. This is not about following fashion. It is about embodying identity. The outside finally reflects the inside. Here, Jung's language of archetypes comes alive. The lover, the queen, the wise woman, all are present in her when she integrates the sides she once rejected. She does not need to choose one face. She learns she contains many. She wears them as expressions of truth, not as costumes to be approved. The awakening also brings her closer to her feminine energy. Too often, women are told to chase, to compete, to control every interaction. But true magnetism arises when she allows life to come toward her. Receptivity is not weakness. It is influence without force. She inspires effort rather than exhausting herself to earn it. This energy is calm, confident, and deeply alluring. In conversation, she feels the same shift. Words are no longer rushed, nor are silences feared. A glance, a pause, even a subtle smile, these hold more power than endless explanations. She understands that mystery is not withholding. It is pacing. It is offering presence without spilling everything at once. Men and women alike are captivated by her calm rhythm. Most of all, independence becomes her foundation. She no longer builds her life around being chosen. She builds a life worth living whether or not anyone joins her. Purpose, friendships, passions, growth. These are no longer secondary. They are her center. And from this center, she becomes magnetic. Because others do not want to complete her. They want to be part of her world. This awakening is not just about love. It touches every part of her existence. Opportunities open because confidence is visible. Relationships shift because boundaries are clear. Even her solitude feels different, no longer heavy, but nourishing. She does not wait for someone to give her value. She brings her value into every space she enters. Jung wrote that the self is not created by rejecting what we are not, but by integrating all that we are. This woman does not deny her softness. She also does not deny her strength. She unites them. She does not cling to youth. She embodies maturity. She does not chase approval. She radiates authority. And it is this union, this coherence, that people feel when they are near her. Imagine her walking into a room. She does not rush to be noticed, yet heads turn. She does not push for attention, yet conversations pause. She does not perform, yet people lean closer. Why? Because presence is greater than perfection. She has become aligned, and alignment is irresistible. This is the essence of awakening. It is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to what was always there, hidden beneath masks and fears. The magnetism that follows is not a trick. It is the natural response to a woman who has come into her wholeness. And now, the path ahead is clear. In the next stage, she will act on this awakening. She will set standards without apology. She will draw boundaries without guilt. And in doing so, she will transform not just herself, but every relationship and space she enters. Because the woman who awakens to her presence is no longer moved by fear. She is moved by clarity, and clarity is the beginning of true power. Awakening is only the beginning. Recognition opens the door, but transformation requires choice. A woman who has seen the old mask for what it is must now decide how she will live without it. And this decision is not made once. It is made again and again in daily gestures and quiet boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They are standards. They are the lines that tell the world how she values herself. Where she once bent to every request, she now pauses. Where she once said yes to avoid conflict, she now says no with calm authority. It is not defiance. It is clarity. This clarity becomes visible. Others notice when she no longer replies to every message instantly, when she declines invitations that drain her, when she holds silence instead of rushing to explain herself. These are small acts, but they reshape her entire life, because boundaries are not spoken into existence. They are lived. Carl Jung believed individuation is marked not by words, but by embodiment. The self becomes real when choices align with truth. Each boundary is such an alignment. Each no is a return to herself. Each standard is a declaration that her worth is not negotiable. At first, this can feel unfamiliar. The old persona whispers warnings. If you hold back, they will leave. But she learns that those who vanish when she stops overgiving were never rooted in love. They were rooted in convenience. The relationships that remain and the new ones that arrive begin to carry more depth. They are drawn to her essence, not her compliance. This is the moment when attraction shifts. She no longer begs for attention. She no longer clings to affection. Instead, she radiates presence and allows others to choose whether they can meet her where she stands. The ones who cannot fall away. The ones who can are drawn closer, not out of obligation, but out of desire. Standards also show in the way she carries herself. Confidence is not just posture, it is how she refuses to shrink. Independence is not isolation. It is the choice to keep growing, to keep living with purpose beyond any relationship. Style is not costume. It is self-expression. She dresses in alignment with her essence, not with the passing demands of others. This transformation is not loud. It is steady. She does not announce her new life. She simply lives it. People begin to notice the change, a new calm in her voice, a new strength in her choices, a new magnetism in her presence. But she is not doing this to be noticed. She is doing it because it is who she has become. This is where individuation becomes visible. The shadow that once whispered in frustration now speaks as wisdom. The persona that once begged for approval now becomes flexible, a tool she wears consciously when needed, but no longer confuses for her identity. The self begins to shine through every choice. Jung often wrote that wholeness is not perfection, but balance. This balance is what others sense when they are near her. They feel safe not because she bends to them, but because she is clear within herself. They feel intrigued, not because she chases, but because she allows space for desire to grow. They feel respect, not because she demands it, but because she embodies it. And here lies the paradox. The less she chases, the more she attracts. The less she explains, the more she is heard. The less she clings, the more others reach toward her. It is not manipulation. It is alignment. Standards communicate silently what words never could. This transformation also changes her inner life. She no longer feels the exhaustion of pretending. She no longer carries the anxiety of wondering whether she is enough. Her boundaries give her rest. Her standards give her freedom. She is not constantly adjusting to keep others comfortable. She is grounded in her own center, and that center becomes the source of her magnetism. When she lives this way, relationships take on a different quality. They are no longer measured by how much she gives away, but by how much authenticity they allow her to keep. She does not settle for crumbs of attention. She does not lower her values to fit into someone else's story. She chooses with dignity who enters her life and who does not. And in this choosing, her world expands. Opportunities open because she carries herself differently. Conversations deepen because she listens without desperation. Love feels less like grasping and more like resonance. The people drawn to her now are those who sense her wholeness, who meet her at her own level, who respect the invisible standards she carries. This is the transformation, living by standards that attract, not chase. It is not about making rules for others. It is about honoring truth within herself. Every action becomes a reflection of that truth. She no longer explains her worth. She embodies it, and this embodiment changes how she is remembered. People may not recall her exact words. They may not remember the details of her outfit, but they remember the way they felt in her presence, calm, intrigued, respected, drawn in. They remember the dignity she carried, the boundaries she lived, the wholeness she radiated. This stage of transformation is not the end. It is the practice. Because boundaries will always be tested. Standards will always be challenged. But a woman who has awakened does not fear the test. She welcomes it as confirmation of her alignment. Each choice deepens her individuation. Each no strengthens her center. Each act of self-respect sharpens her presence. And so she continues to live differently. Not for the gaze of others, not for fleeting approval, but for the quiet satisfaction of being whole. Her life becomes her own, and in that ownership, she becomes unforgettable. In the next and final part, we will reflect on what all of this means, not just for attraction, but for the soul. Because the deepest magnetism is not about who notices you. It is about how you have become whole within yourself. Every journey must find its closing. And this one returns us to a truth both simple and profound. Attraction, respect, and presence are not born of youth or beauty. They are born of wholeness. A woman who has walked through the masks of persona, faced the hidden voice of shadow, and returned to her center does not need to chase. Her magnetism flows from being aligned with herself. She has become complete. And this completeness is felt more than it is seen. Others sense it in her calm, in her clarity, in the way she carries silence without fear. They may not be able to name it, but they feel it. Presence speaks louder than decoration. Carl Jung often said, the goal of life is individuation, the integration of all. We are both light and shadow into one coherent self. This is not perfection. It is balance. It is the union of strength and softness, clarity, and compassion. When a woman lives from this union, she does not perform for approval. She embodies truth. Think of the difference. One life built on constant striving, chasing messages, adjusting appearances, begging silently for validation. Another life built on inner gravity, standing firm, speaking calmly, allowing love and respect to come naturally. Which life feels heavier? Which life feels free? The lesson is not that one must abandon beauty, charm, or grace. It is that these are strongest when rooted in authenticity. Perfume, clothing, conversation, all can become extensions of essence, but they cannot create essence. Essence comes from alignment with the soul. The irresistible woman is not the one who gives everything away. She is the one who knows what is hers to give and what must be kept. This is the secret of boundaries, not as walls, but as expressions of dignity, not to shut others out, but to keep the self whole. And here we arrive at the heart of magnetism. Men and women alike may admire beauty, but they remember wholeness. They remember how they felt in the presence of someone who did not cling, who did not beg, who did not pretend. They remember the calm authority of a woman who has chosen herself. This kind of presence does not fade with years. In fact, it often deepens. Because as time passes, the masks grow heavier, and those who remove them shine more brightly. The woman who embodies her soul becomes more magnetic at 60 than she ever was at 20. For her radiance is not painted on, it is lived. In the end, attraction is not luck. It is not manipulation. It is not the performance of a perfect role. It is the natural response to authenticity. When a woman integrates her shadow, refines her persona, and lives from herself, she becomes magnetic without trying. And this is the gift: she no longer worries about being enough. She knows she is whole. Others are drawn not to her need, but to her freedom. Not to her insecurity, but to her clarity. Not to her perfection, but to her presence. Let us close, then, with a symbol. Imagine a flame in the center of a room. It does not chase anyone. It does not demand attention. It simply burns in its place, steady and alive. And yet all who enter the room feel its warmth. That is what a complete woman becomes: a steady flame, a presence that warms, illuminates, and remains unforgettable. The life lesson is this: stop chasing mirrors that distort. Stop bending into roles that erase. Return to yourself and let your presence do the work. For wholeness is the deepest form of beauty, and presence the highest form of magnetism. Now, I invite you to reflect. Which of these 6 habits already lives within you? Which ones are asking to be awakened more fully in your life? Share your thoughts in the comments, not just for me, but for those who listen alongside you. Your reflection may be the spark someone else needs tonight. And if these words have resonated with you, carry them gently into your days. Speak with calm, walk with clarity. Hold your boundaries, and above all, remain whole. Because the world does not forget the woman who radiates her soul.